The information they gathered confirmed it. Dead End was in Windport. Dead End. There was not a person on the Demon Continent who didn't know that name. Even among the supered, they were considered particularly dangerous, beasts that targeted mainly children. When Roxy was small, her mother had used the name as a threat. If you don't behave, Dead End will come and steal you away. That was the kind of reputation they carried. When they pooled their information, the picture was difficult to reconcile with what she'd expected. Talhand had gathered the most useful intelligence. 3 people in the group. They referred to themselves as Mad Dog Eris, Guard Dog Ruijerd, and Kennel Master Ruijerd. The guard dog and the kennel master were apparently brothers, which raised immediate questions about both family naming conventions and guild record-keeping. The mad dog had red hair and a sword, the guard dog was a tall beanpole with a spear, and the kennel master was a small figure with a staff noted as a magic item. Neither had a particularly good reputation, but the guard dog was reportedly kind, protective of children, and possessed of a strong sense of justice. Hard to believe anyone in their right mind would pretend to be Dead End, Roxy said. The guard dog's handsome, Elenalise offered. Shall I invite him to my bed for more answers? Talhand spat in disdain. They decided to avoid Dead End entirely and focus on their actual objective, finding Paul's family. 2 days to gather information on Lilia and Aisha, then submit missing persons requests at the guild and move on. Roxy's forte was making swift decisions. Rudeus had apparently considered this an airhead tendency, but she considered it a strength. That was how she miscounted the days and ended up using one of them on personal curiosity. On the second day, Roxy went to see what Dead End was actually up to. They were on the beach, a bald, tall man and a red-haired girl, training at high speed. The girl attacked with both hands on her sword, swinging at a frightening pace. The man deflected each strike without visible effort, his technique operating at a level that was simply beyond Roxy's range of evaluation. She watched from behind a large boulder, peeking around its shadow. It felt somewhat like being the older sister of a pitcher watching their sibling practice from the stands, except the pitcher could probably kill most of the stadium. Ruijerd's sixth sense had already detected her. She didn't know that. When he casually glanced in her direction, their eyes met across the beach. The intensity of his gaze produced an immediate and visceral response in her nervous system. Prey. That was the word. She felt like prey. She fled. Ruijerd looked away and returned to the spa. The distraction was enough. Eris drove in with a combination, struck the back of his hand with the force of someone who had been building to this moment for a week, and Ruijerd's sword hit the sand. Yes! I did it! I did it, right? Yeah! Eris pumped both hands in the air. Ruijerd let out a quiet sigh. He hadn't planned to let her win for a while yet. Still, she had earned it. Roxy made it back to the inn, looking over her shoulder the entire way, mentally drafting contingency plans involving magic crystals and scroll-inscribed barrier circles. She found Elenalice's door closed and various noises filtering through it. She waited. She prepared her equipment. She told her hand not to drift south, intercepted it with her other hand, and returned it to a neutral position. She waited more. An hour passed. Then 2, then 3. The noises continued. When her irritation peaked, Roxy kicked in the door. 5 men. Elenalice in the middle, in a state of considerable satisfaction, inviting Roxy to join in. The scene was sufficiently reprehensible that Roxy's brain refused to process it. She backed out screaming, retrieved her staff, chanted a full incantation, and partially destroyed the inn with an icicle blast. They departed on the 3rd day. No useful information gathered. Request not submitted to the guild. Inn repair costs deducted from their budget. This is all your fault, Roxy said. I was gathering information, Elenalice replied. I was in a back alley when they approached me. 5 strong men, treating me like a... I don't want to know. Elenalice sighed contentedly. Roxy had understood the appeal of love and intimacy for the first time when she saw how close Paul and Zenith were with each other. That was when she started wanting something like that for herself. She had developed a specific fantasy about it, a labyrinth. She would encounter a tall, handsome young human man somewhere around the mid-levels. They would fight their way out together. Their love would bloom in that furnace of shared hardship. When she actually entered a labyrinth, the fantasy shattered quickly. By the 5th floor, there were no other solo adventurers. By the 10th, she needed a party, but people laughed at her for looking 12 and turned her away. She descended further alone, nearly died several times, and never met a single handsome man. She still held on to the hope of an ordinary love story, just not underground. "We could find you a man together," Elinalise offered. "Absolutely not." That was how Roxy made her first misstep and began her adventure across the Demon Continent. Back to Rudeus's perspective. The night after meeting Gallus Cleaner, we waited 15 days for further details about the job. When they came, the plan was as vague as I'd expected. Infiltrate a holding location, free the captives, get them home. Method left to us. That was fine. We were just swords for hire. Ruijerd and I would handle the mission. Eris would stay at the inn. At midnight, I walked to the pier at the harbour's edge. A hooded figure waited by a small boat. Per our arrangement, I handed Ruijerd over, hands shackled behind his back. They put a sack over his head. He was guided aboard among other hooded figures. Even with a bag over his head, he kept looking in my direction the whole time. In my head, "Goodbye, my lover." I banned it immediately. He wasn't my lover. This was temporary. The song persisted. The next day, we sold the lizard. The lizard, who had carried us all the way from Rikarisu, who had been trained to obedience by Ruijerd's quiet presence, who had grown attached to Eris and regularly licked her head until her hair was soaked in drool, was sold to a Rugonian merchant for a reasonable price. The merchant was impressed by the lizard's temperament. I decided to give it a name, Gelaha, a man of the sea who longed for human companionship. Then I decided to revoke the name immediately. Naming it only made it worse. Eris wrapped her arms around its neck and said nothing. The lizard licked her one last time. I heard her sniffle once we turned away. We boarded our ship, a brand new model, maiden voyage, pushing the envelope by sailing all the way to Zant port. Eris was immediately and comprehensively impressed by its size, its motion, the fact that it was a real ship rather than the 1/10 scale model I'd once kept in my room. She shouted with enthusiasm for approximately 90 seconds before going below deck and discovering that she was violently seasick. She spent 4 days in the cabin with a bucket. I had played enough dating sims to know that ships were treasure troves of event flags. Dolphins alongside the hull, the heroine marveling at the view, some version of me presenting myself as more impressive. Or sea monster attack, shipwreck, deserted island, 2 people alone, the gradual thaw of a tsundere heroine, the echo of crashing waves as a backdrop for something more. On the topic of a sea monster attack, I had specific hopes regarding tentacles and their narrative applications. Reality delivered an octopus on day 4. A large one, startling blue, enormous. It was dispatched within minutes by the ship's contracted escort party, Aqua Road, an S-ranked group that specialized in sea escorts and held an exclusive contract with the Shipwrights Guild. I watched them work from the side, noting that their individual strengths were lower than I'd expected from S-rank. Their swordsperson wasn't as strong as Ghislaine, their tank wasn't close to Ruijerd, and their magician was weaker than me. But they moved as a single unit. Each person fulfilled their role precisely, covered for the others reflexively, and defeated a creature that would have given a collection of individually strong fighters serious trouble. That was what teamwork meant. I looked at Dead End by comparison. Ruijerd was outstanding, former squadron leader, capable of covering for both of us simultaneously. But Ruijerd was also too strong. In practice, he ended up carrying us, which meant we weren't really functioning as a team, so much as 2 people orbiting someone who could have handled everything alone. Eris was excellent at controlled aggression, but couldn't adapt her rhythm to ours and wouldn't cover for either of us once a battle went long. We were A-ranked in output, but something closer to S-ranked individual, plus 2 passengers in actual practice. This was worth fixing. From the deck above, a pale hand appeared over the railing. "Rudeus, get up here. How can you just stand there when I'm suffering?" I went up to her. "The sea is beautiful," I offered. "You're so mean." She burst into tears and threw her arms around me. Day 5. Eris was in the cabin. I was attending to her. The mechanism was, healing magic eased seasickness by temporarily rebalancing the autonomic nervous system. I couldn't cast it continuously, and the effect was partial, but it helped. Enough that she'd asked me to keep doing it. Enough that she was using my lap as a pillow while I kept my hands around her head, casting repeatedly. This was where things got complicated. Eris, who was normally so forceful, so loud, so physically dangerous, lay weakly on my lap in a dimly lit cabin, occasionally looking up at me with unfocused eyes and asking in a voice that was pitched exactly wrong for my composure. Please. Please just do it. She meant heal her. My internal volume controls had stopped working. I knew rationally that she was ill, that she trusted me completely, that she was not in any condition to consent to anything, that she wasn't even asking for anything. I had made myself a promise, and I intended to keep it. Inner Merlin was citing the promise I'd made to wait until I was 15, until the journey was over. Inner Arthur was screaming about Excalibur and the Holy Grail, and my hand, my Gawain, being positioned with unfortunate proximity to it. She was developing rapidly, generously. The genetics had decided not to waste time. Rudeus? She looked up. Are you okay? Her voice at that pitch. The Battle of Camlan was imminent. I need to go to the bathroom. Oh, okay. See you in a bit. I exited the cabin quickly. I found a deserted spot. What followed was brief and restorative. A transformation, as the sages describe it, from the base state of a young man into something closer to enlightenment. Like a magical girl completing her transformation sequence and gaining new powers. Bodhisattva energy. Pure clarity. I returned to the cabin wearing the expression of someone who had reached a significant spiritual milestone. Did you eat something? What? You smell weird. Sniff, sniff. I had forgotten to wash my hands. Eris recovered the moment we disembarked. I never want to ride a ship again. She was fully herself within approximately 40 seconds of solid ground. We'll need to do it one more time to cross from Millis to the central continent. Her face fell, then went anxious. Will you heal me the whole time again? Sure, though next time I might do something naughty. Why would you say something so cruel? It wasn't cruelty. I understood now how a dog felt having a meal set in front of it and being restrained from eating. The meal didn't stop smelling good. The hunger didn't go away. You're really cute, Eris. I'm genuinely struggling. Her face went red. Fine. Next time you can touch me, but only a little bit, okay? There was a chasm between the enormity of what I was suppressing and the word little. Just a little won't cut it. Let's wait until you're ready for the full version. She was speechless. We started walking towards Zant Port. The city looked similar to Windport, rolling hills, harbour livelier than the city centre. But the palette was entirely different. Wooden buildings painted in bright colours to protect against salt air, trees lining the roads, green everywhere. The Demon Continent had been all whites, greys, and browns. One ocean separated these two worlds. We exchanged our demon currency, took a small loss to transaction fees, and found that most affordable inns near the guild were fully booked. Rainy season approaching. The Great Forest's 3-month deluge was imminent, making the highway impassable, and adventurers who came for the special seasonal monsters had filled everything decent. The available option was a slum lodge, 3 large copper coins a night, no meals, no services. Eris declared it not too bad. I had complaints. I cleaned the room with hot wind magic, and Eris washed her laundry. By sunset, we were ready. I left Eris to guard the luggage. She resisted until I mentioned that someone might steal her freshly washed underwear. The only person who would steal that is you. Technically accurate in terms of temptation, but unfair as an accusation. I had never actually done it. I walked to the harbour alone at night, Ruijerd's spear in one hand. The pier at the harbour's edge had 4 large wooden warehouses. I entered warehouse 3. Inside, one man with a mohawk, quietly cleaning. I gave the password. Yo, Steve, how's Jane, you know, the one that lives by the beach? The man looked at me with some skepticism, apparently not having expected a child. Once I mentioned I was running an errand for my master and here to collect cargo, he understood and led me deeper into the building. Behind a large wooden box in the back, a set of stairs leading down into a damp cave. We walked for almost an hour, emerged outside the city in a forest, and arrived at what looked like a rich man's villa hidden among trees. This was the holding location. A white-haired butler checked us at the door. I gave the referral name, Ditz, and was granted entry. Standard smuggler interior. Shady men at round tables. A caged beast in a side room with a magic circle. The smell of animals and something worse. Room 202. Downstairs, not upstairs, the second floor was a dummy used to misdirect investigators, while the actual goods were held in the basement. When I opened the door, Ruijerd looked up at me. He'd been sitting with hands shackled behind his back for a week. Emerald sprigs of hair were beginning to crop up on his shaved scalp, giving him the appearance of someone who had developed a small moss situation on the top of their head. He motioned for me to lean close. Mohawk panicked. "Hey, stop that! He'll bite your ear off!" I leaned in anyway. Ruijerd whispered, 7 Beastfolk children in the adjacent room, taken against their will. He could hear them crying. "We're saving them," he said. "It wasn't a question." "That's the job," I agreed. "The other question, what about the guards?" "Kill them all." Ruijerd said, a reasonable proposal. Gallus had never specified methodology, and leaving witnesses from a smuggling organization was a documented path to having assassins reared from birth sent after you. I had spent the past year calibrating my stone cannon specifically to non-lethal settings. I had, in the past year, not killed anyone. Ruijerd saw my expression and said, "Don't make that face. Those hands of yours are for protecting Eris." He was looking out for me. He knew I wasn't ready, knew the mental preparation I thought I'd done wasn't real preparation, and he was giving me a way to not have to cross that line tonight. I told him I'd handle the children. I passed him his spear. "He'll still go berserk," I mentioned to Mohawk. "Huh?" Mohawk was the first. Ruijerd moved without sound. The screaming started immediately downstairs as I went the other way. The room was dark. 4 girls and 3 boys, all around my age, all naked, all with beast or elf ears, hands bound behind them. Several had bruised faces and swollen eyes. I noted in passing, and with what I considered admirable restraint given the circumstances, that they had been stripped of their clothing and bound, and that they appeared physically developed at varying rates, and that one of the dog-eared girls was going to be extraordinarily... I stopped myself. Healer mode. Sage mode. I had achieved enlightenment on this ship not 12 hours ago. I sent the 3 boys to stand watch at the door. "You're men, you can do that." Then began removing the girls' binds and healing their injuries. One had a broken rib. Another had a fractured femur. These men had been vicious. The cat-eared girl watched me throughout with a steady, evaluating gaze. She was the only one not showing fresh tears. Her injuries were the worst of anyone's. "Why were you brought here?" I asked. "We were playing in the forest, and a strange man grabbed us. Mew!" I stopped. She had said mew at the end of that sentence. Not stylistically, not metaphorically. Literally, mew, as a sentence terminal particle, the way certain regional dialects append a verbal signature. A real, genuine cat beastfolk who said mew in conversation. Eris had once attempted to do this as an act, and the comparison was instructive. The original bore no resemblance to the imitation. I wanted to grope her breasts. No, absolutely not. I am a healer. I am in sage mode. I achieved bodhisattva-level spiritual clarity less than a day ago. "So you were all taken against your will?" I asked, maintaining my composure. They nodded. Good. This was a rescue, not a complication. Ruijerd returned. His forehead protector was back on. His clothes were clean. Not a drop of blood. "How do you do that?" I said. He shrugged and went to find the children something to wear. The something he found, curtains. He had cut the curtains into feathered robes for 7 beastfolk children. Each one fit approximately well enough to constitute clothing. I had thought of him as a warrior. He was also, apparently, a tailor in emergencies. I stepped outside to dispose of the bodies. A fireball of approximately 5-meter radius seemed appropriate for incineration purposes. I may have slightly miscalculated. The fire spread to the building. I switched to water magic and put it out before significant structural damage occurred. I noted that I should probably not attempt to operate as a crematorium without more careful scale calibration. We returned to the building. The cat girl immediately asked about the dog that had been locked in the magic circle room. The dog. Right, I had seen it earlier, chained within a magic circle, silver-furred, enormous. I had assumed it was a beast. Apparently, it was the sacred beast, symbol of the local beastfolk tribe. I went back for it. The magic circle was a barrier with a fuel source on the floor directly above. a magic crystal inside what looked like a lantern. I removed the lantern, the circle dissipated, and I severed the chain with magic. The collar had no keyhole, but I found a joint in it and forced it open with earth magic. The puppy shook its neck. Then it knocked me to the ground and began licking my face. It was the fluffiest thing I had ever touched. Silky, soft, silver fur with a weight behind it that made my ribs creak. I decided I didn't mind being licked. Then a voice. "Bastard! What have you done to the sacred beast?" A man with chocolate-coloured skin, beast ears, and a tiger's tail, resembling Ghislaine structurally, but missing the most distinguishing feature. This person had pecs, male. He roared. "Grah!" Volume many times greater than anything Eris had ever produced, with what felt like mass. I collapsed. My eardrums rang. My brain felt like it had been struck with a physical object. I tried to channel mana, and nothing happened. The man lifted me by my collar to face level. He looked at me with a frown. "Just a kid. Can't bring myself to kill you." An older man appeared. This was Gustav Didoldia, as I would later learn. His son Gyes, the one holding me, contributed the observation that I had been fondling the sacred beast with a perverted grin. I was not going to argue about my expression. I was going to argue about fondling, but I couldn't move, so I argued in my head instead. The sacred beast barked. The two men took a knee. A conversation ensued, in which the sacred beast barked "woof" repeatedly, and both men interpreted this as nuanced communication. Gustav said we should interrogate the child about where the other captives were. Gyes said the last ship left tomorrow. Gustav said we'd take the boy to the village and throw him in a cell. Gyes tied my hands, hoisted me over his shoulder, and ran into the forest at speed. I watched the silver blur of the sacred beast following behind us the whole way. "Greetings. My name is Rudeus, and I used to be a shut-in. I'm reviewing a new, free apartment. No security deposit, no rent. A one-room space with 2 meals and time to think. The bed is straw. The toilet is a large jar. No running water, but warm water magic solves this. The food is actually excellent. Regional Beastfolk fruit, vegetables, and lightly seasoned meat that makes everything from the Demon Continent taste like a memory of suffering. Primary selling point, security. Iron bars. The only weakness is that they can be opened with magic, which I am choosing not to deploy while I wait for this misunderstanding to resolve itself through legitimate communication. Gyes stripped me of my clothing before throwing me in here. Standard Beastfolk custody procedure, humiliation through exposure. I am naked in a treehouse jail waiting for morning. Gustav told his son not to touch me until he returned, so I'm safe. Once the old man finds Ruijerd and the children, this resolves. Ruijerd will explain what happened. The children will vouch for us. The perverted grin accusation, I should note, pertained to a dog. I have no romantic interest in dogs. Helpless naked children, on the other hand. No, that is a worse sentence. I am not completing that sentence. I am fine. Everything is fine. Ruijerd waited near the city with the children. Rudeus wasn't back. He ran the possibilities. Not lost, no signal, possibly captured. The cat-eared girl, Tona, he would learn, came over and patted his leg. "I'm sorry about before, Mew." He told her it was fine. He hadn't used beast god tongue in a long time. He couldn't remember the last time before this. His third eye detected someone incoming fast from the direction of the building. He had the children take cover and raised his spear. The figure stopped just outside his range, an elderly male beast person with a hatchet, wary but composed, the air of a real warrior. Then Tona called out, "Grandpa, Mew," and ran to him, and everything settled. Gustav Didoldia thanked Ruijerd for saving his granddaughter. Then mentioned that a boy with a perverted grin had been caught fondling the sacred beast and thrown in a cell. Ruijerd recognized this immediately. "That's my companion." He explained that Rudeus was a warrior, and if they weren't planning to kill him, there was no need to hurry. The children came first. Eris was alone at the inn. The Beastfolk didn't torture, and Rudeus had no qualms about being seen naked. He had literally once told Ruijerd, "If Eris tries to peek in on me while I'm showering, you don't have to stop her." Rudeus would survive the night. He would sort himself out in the morning. He almost certainly would.